Good morning, Captain Doug here again, filming from Phuket, Thailand. Some of you know that in the 1989 and 90 1 year contract, I flew and repaired airplanes for the UN in Sudan and Kenya. It was an eventful year, dangerous at times. And about 10 years after that, I returned. I wrote down some of the stories of what had happened there. And I thought about publishing this into a book, but I really didn't want to take the time and energy to do that. Profit was not my motive, and I'm not sure who was necessarily going to enjoy these stories, but they're all true stories. And so I want to read one of those for you today. There's like 10 of them that I've written so far. I could write another 10 just from memory. So let's read this one. I was going to try to do this in an outdoor environment here in Thailand, but it's still rainy season and it's pretty real drizzly out today. I shot a video out to the beach and I had to dodge the rain showers. Anyway, so here goes. This is called The Shots Rang Out at the Airport. And this took place in northwest Kenya in the second half of that year contract. And the story will kind of lay that out a little bit. This morning started out quiet, as most mornings did in the village of Loki in far northwest Kenya. As I recall the story, it feels and looks like a Saturday in my mind's eye. It was one of those rare non-flying days, and I had scurried off early to the airport to do some much-needed maintenance on Alpha Sierra, our UN contracted de Havilland Twin Otter aircraft, which was now 15 or 20 years old, which is new by African standards. I recall having the airplane's main passenger and adjoining cargo doors open. I likely was fiddling around with the battery, probably swapping it out for a similar NiCad battery that had received a deep cycle charge. Additionally, the hangar, which consisted of a 6-foot by 6-foot by 18-foot shipping container plumbed with 110 volt electricity, also had its large, heavy steel doors open to allow daylight and a slight breeze into the cacophonous steel cave that would soon become an oven in the 120-degree sub-Saharan sun. But as they said, it's a dry heat. This day, as had become routine, my assistant had showed up unannounced, uninvited, but not unwelcome. Ishmael was all of 19 years old. He had said he was from neighboring Uganda, spoke French, English, Ugandan, and had picked up some of the local Turkanese tribe language. Ishmael was short, had moderately dark skin, and was not typically full of words, which, as you'll hear, becomes critical as the unforeseen drama was about to unfold. I was in the container diddling around with the above-mentioned battery when the first shot rang out. It wouldn't be until later that I realized that this was a gunshot, instead of what I initially assumed was someone throwing a rock at the hangar or the aircraft, since these were the only metal objects for a mile or so. I recall looking up, but amongst other indicators, Ishmael stood calmly and also quietly at the hangar entrance. So I returned to diddling. Diddling, by the way, is a word that refers to the art of years of technical schooling combined with years of work experience into the focused act of paying a huge amount of attention to several minute details, any of which might destroy a 25 cent component, say an O-ring, causing a $1,000 component to fail, leading to the potential loss of a multi-million-dollar flying machine and the accompanying 25 or 100 or 300 souls on board, one of which may be yourself and or a loved one. See Space Shuttle Challenger, numerous aircraft accidents with, in quotes, mechanical failure, henceforth referred to as diddling. So I diddled a minute or two more until the next shot rang out. Unlike the first shot, that I perceived largely as a percussion, this percussion was followed by a telltale whistle as a tiny projectile makes the air sing as it parts the air at almost the speed of sound. My eyes again focused on Ishmael for clues or feedback that something was awry. I had been in Africa almost 10 months, and these were the first gunshots I'd heard in a chaotic land that is often perceived as dangerous. I stepped around Ishmael, who appeared cemented at the hangar entrance. With the Twin Otter, my Jeep, and the runway, and eventually town in front of me to the north, my perception was that the shots were from the south, behind the hangar. As I peered around the open container heavy steel doors, I saw the first signs of trouble. 4 or 5 children, approximately 5 or 6 years old, were kicking up dust, running past the hangar, over the runway, in the direction of town. "What's going on?" I asked, half hopeful that someone spoke English. The reply was in Turkinese, of which unfortunately I had only learned cursory hi and bye greetings. Beyond that, I knew not a word. Again, my eyes and voice fixated on Ishmael. What are they saying? Nothing. Nada. Zero. Ishmael, who I had grown to like, teach, and mentor, stood in absolute silence. Was he just being stoic? Was he lost between languages? Or was he riveted in fear, with fear? My young friend was frustrating the hell out of me. Two more shots rang out. In those decisive nanoseconds that we pilots, aircraft mechanics, and other humans sometimes find ourselves, I had to make a vital and perhaps life-saving decision. Even though the bullets were clearly just overhead or to one side, they were not hitting the hangar, the airplane, myself, or Ishmael yet. What I had to decide was, do we take the time to close, lock, and possibly save from destruction or vandalism, either both the hangar or the plane? I quickly calculated it would take 1 3/4 minutes or 105 seconds, whichever you prefer, to complete this task. Looking back, I think of this as borrowed time. 3 more shots rang out. I barked a command to Ishmael to put the boarding ladder in the plane, close the passenger and cargo doors, and get into the Jeep. Although obviously hurried, I talked as slow as possible. Kept the instructions short but direct because it was obvious Ishmael's mind had seized. I grabbed the large, rusty-hinged steel doors and threw my shoulder and heart into them, trying to move them hastily. Slam, slam, they hit the jambs with authority. Click, twist, snap went the latch and padlock. My mind acknowledged the mere formality of this effort, for anyone with a gun and ambition to do so could access the hangar and its belongings. But unless they are things that can be eaten or used to start or sustain a cooking fire, they would be of little value to the local tribal people. As I sprinted the 50 feet to Alpha Sierra and was ducking under the tail, 2 more shots rang out. One hit something metallic. In addition to almost needing to change my undies, my heart raced. I could have used another nanosecond right now, but they had all been used up. Onto the adrenaline I flew. As I rounded the tail, I encountered Ishmael still fumbling with the ladder and passenger door. Note the difference between fumbling and diddling. I got the cargo door support loose, slammed and locked the door. Ishmael got the passenger ladder loose, and together we closed the passenger door. As I was turning the key on the door's lock, I asked Ishmael if he can see the shooters and commanded him to get into the Jeep. Wrong. Never ask a frozen man to do 2 things at once. As I pivoted to take the 3 steps to the Jeep, most days it would take 6 or 7 steps, but today we were taking longer strides. I encountered my frozen Ishmael blocking my egress into the driver's seat of the Jeep. As I yelled, "Get in," and simultaneously picked up his 125-pound frame, conveyed him through the Jeep's interior, and not so gracefully planting him on the passenger seat, or more accurately, the far passenger door. Another shot rang out. Thankfully, the Jeep's key and the airplane keys were on the same ring, so there was little fumbling for keys. The motor was running, transmission in gear, and vehicle lurching forward before my left foot left the dirt tarmac. Again, I found myself nanosecond deficient. For even though the Jeep was moving, my mind was several feet behind the action. Do I drive down the runway since it's the formal way back to town? Or do I double back to a more direct trail back to the UN compound, where I was ultimately seeking refuge? The trail to the compound, plan A, is more bush-like, i.e. more hiding spots, and is closer to where I perceived the shots and running children to coming from. However, the runway route, plan B, would nearly double the distance to be covered and was not necessarily secure and might in fact leave us exposed on an elevated, straight, couple 1,000-foot scramble we would need to make to connect with the town road. As mentioned earlier, I was lacking nanoseconds and decided to floor it and press on. Plan C, by the way, was to put it in four-wheel drive and make my own trail. It looks good in TV ads, but not that practical under fire. Okay, that's the bulk of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Just notes what had happened and what transpired that day. The folks doing the shooting were from the neighboring Sudan, which was only miles away from where we were in Kenya, northwest Kenya. They are from the Taposa tribe. And these are cross-border skirmishes between these villages that have gone on for decades, if not centuries. And they go back and forth. And what they were doing, they were largely there to steal goats. And the kids were the goat herders, is why you saw the kids running by. Goats and cows. The results of that day were 16 children, child goat herders, that were huddled in ditches to avoid the gunshots, were shot. They were shot as they crouched into these little spots. And numerous goats were stolen. The shooting continued for 45 minutes and children were shot and killed right outside the UNICEF tent compound where I was staying. The additional follow-up of that, several days later, the Kenyan government brought up a Hughes 500 helicopter with machine guns mounted on it, and did a little bit of revenge across the border, but that's probably unofficial. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please subscribe, leave a comment if you will. Like I say, I've got several more of these stories that I can go ahead and read out. And it was a very interesting year. I was on a one-year contract for a UN under a subcontractor flying and fixing airplanes in Africa. So this is Captain Doug out. Take care.